The room smelled of antiseptic, the harsh fluorescent lights casting cold reflections on the floor. Sweat ran down the SEAL commander's temple as he barked orders into his radio, tension thick in the air. Around him, a team of elite soldiers waited for someone, anyone, who could handle the chaos about to unfold. The emergency had escalated faster than anyone had anticipated. Every second mattered, every delay could cost a life. "Get me someone qualified," he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency, eyes scanning the chaos as monitors beeped frantically. The room needed a hero. And he needed one now. In the corner, nearly invisible, stood an old nurse. Her uniform was faded, her hair streaked with gray, her hands worn from decades of work that most had long since left behind. She had been retired for years, living quietly in a small town, away from the adrenaline and heartbreak of hospitals and trauma wards. But the pull of duty, that invisible thread that ties the truly selfless to the lives of others, had drawn her back. She didn't say a word. She didn't march up boldly like the rest of the younger staff. She just stood, observing the storm with a calmness that almost seemed unnatural. If the SEAL commander had noticed her, he didn't show it. His gaze swept past her, searching for someone with fresh certifications, modern training, and hands that trembled less at pressure. Everyone in the room felt the weight of expectation, the suffocating anxiety that comes when life hangs by a fragile thread. The nurse waited silently, her eyes soft yet steady, holding memories of battles fought in other rooms, on other days, long before the digital charts and protocols had dominated medicine. The injured man on the table, a young soldier barely out of his teens, was pale, his breaths shallow. The monitors screamed warnings as the commander's team worked frantically to stabilize him. Every tool, every technique they tried, seemed insufficient. They were trained, yes, but they were out of their depth. The tension built until it was almost unbearable, until the air itself felt like it might crack under the pressure. That's when the nurse stepped forward, her movements deliberate, her presence commanding a quiet authority without a single shout. She approached the table, and the room seemed to pause. There was a weight to her gaze, a depth that came from decades of witnessing life and death in equal measure. She placed her hands on the soldier's chest, her touch confident, precise, almost reverent. The SEAL commander finally noticed her, his eyes narrowing as he took in her aged frame. "You?" he asked, disbelief and skepticism etched across his face. "We need someone trained, qualified." Without answering, the nurse rolled up her sleeve. On her forearm was a faded tattoo, a symbol that immediately caught the commander's attention, a caduceus intertwined with a navy trident. Beneath it were dates, decades of service, names etched in small letters, reminders of lives saved, battles endured, sacrifices made. The tattoo told a story more powerful than any resume could, more convincing than any certification. She was qualified, more than qualified. She was a survivor of countless crises, a healer who had faced horrors most would run from, and she carried that experience on her skin, a permanent testament to a lifetime of courage. For a moment, silence fell over the room. The younger medics and soldiers shifted uncomfortably, caught between disbelief and awe. The SEAL commander, a man who had faced unimaginable dangers, took a slow breath. He could see it now, the certainty in her eyes, the steadiness in her hands. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and stepped back. She was allowed to lead. The nurse's first actions were deliberate, almost ritualistic. She checked the soldier's vitals, her hands moving with a rhythm born of decades of experience. She spoke softly, almost a whisper, reassuring the young man, grounding him in a reality he barely understood through his pain and fear. Each instruction she gave to the team was clear and precise, cutting through the chaos like a blade through mist. Within minutes, she had established a rhythm, a system that brought order to the pandemonium. Time seemed to bend around her. Where others panicked, she remained calm. Where others hesitated, she acted. And slowly, ever so slowly, the soldier's condition stabilized. Every second was a battle, every breath a victory. The commander watched, unable to tear his eyes away, as the nurse maneuvered through the crisis with a grace that felt almost cinematic, almost unreal. She was a living embodiment of experience and resilience, of the quiet strength that comes from facing unimaginable odds and refusing to back down. In the following hours, as more patients arrived, she moved tirelessly between them, her tattoo catching the light like a badge of honor. Stories emerged from the room: an elderly man whose heart had faltered, a child injured in an accident, a mother struggling to breathe. Each time, she was there, steadying hands, compassionate eyes, an unspoken promise that someone cared, that someone would not give up. The younger medics began to follow her lead, their confidence growing under her guidance. The commander, too, found a strange comfort in her presence. It wasn't just skill she brought to the room, it was hope. Outside the walls of that chaos, the world continued, unaware of the quiet heroics unfolding inside. But inside, in that bright, sterile room, lives were being rewritten. The nurse's hands moved like poetry, each action deliberate, each touch infused with decades of wisdom. She reminded everyone present that experience, compassion, and unwavering courage often outweigh the flashiest credentials. And slowly, the impossible became possible. Hours passed, and the last of the critical cases stabilized. The room, once filled with frantic energy, fell into an exhausted hush. The SEAL commander finally approached her, his expression softened, almost humbled. I doubted you," he admitted, his voice rough. "But you saved them. All of them." The nurse merely smiled, a small, quiet smile that carried more strength than words ever could. "I didn't do it alone," she said, gesturing to the team she had guided. "We did it together." The story of that day did not end with medals or headlines. There were no grand announcements, no public accolades. But within the walls of that emergency room, a young soldier who had nearly slipped away from the world survived, a team of medics found their confidence, and a commander learned a lesson he would never forget: never underestimate the power of experience, of calm under pressure, and of a heart willing to fight for others, no matter its age. The nurse, once overlooked and underestimated, returned home quietly afterward. Her tattoo, now a symbol of both her past and the life she had just saved, gleamed faintly in the fading sunlight. She was content, not for recognition, but for the knowledge that in a world often obsessed with youth and credentials, true courage and skill sometimes come quietly, in the hands of someone who has lived and loved and lost, and still chooses to show up. Her story rippled outward quietly. The young soldiers she saved carried it in their hearts, the medics she guided shared it among themselves, and the commander, hardened by war and loss, shared it reluctantly, always emphasizing the lesson he had learned from a humble, old nurse who had refused to stand by. In a world that often rushes past quiet heroism, she had proven that true impact is measured not by age or appearances, but by the depth of one's commitment and the courage to act when it matters most. This story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary people are those we least expect, those who refuse to be defined by age or circumstance. That quiet courage, the kind that doesn't need applause, can change lives, heal hearts, and inspire others to believe in the possibility of kindness, second chances, and the profound difference one individual can make. If this story inspires you to believe in the power of compassion and resilience, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let the world know that second chances, quiet heroes, and acts of kindness matter more than we often realize. Years later, the nurse would sometimes visit the hospital, not for glory, not for recognition, but to check on those whose lives she had touched. She would sit quietly, hands folded in her lap, and watch the young doctors and nurses she had mentored carry forward the lessons of patience, empathy, and calm strength. She had once been dismissed as too old or out of practice, but she knew better. The quiet persistence of love, skill, and dedication never fades. It endures, like the tattoo on her arm, a permanent reminder of a life spent giving all that one could, and saving the lives of those who needed it most. And in the evenings, when the lights dimmed and the chaos of the hospital faded, she would think of the young soldier whose life she had saved that day. She would remember the fear, the panic, the uncertainty. And she would smile quietly to herself, knowing that one small act, guided by experience and courage, had been enough to turn despair into hope. As you finish watching this story, if it touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs inspiration today. And before you go, leave a comment telling us what this story taught you about courage, resilience, and the power of showing up when it matters most. Because sometimes, heroes aren't the ones we expect. Sometimes, they're the quiet, overlooked, and underestimated, those who carry their wisdom in silence until the moment comes when they must act. And when they do, the world is forever changed.